In this video, we'll be looking ahead to 2028. I'm going to put up the two best candidates on both sides. With Republicans, it is of course going to be JD Vance. He is going to have that high name recognition after being vice president for Trump for 4 years. By the time 2028 rolls around, he's the best possible person Republicans could nominate. Meanwhile, for Democrats, Josh Shapiro is the person that they should go with. They need to win the Rust Belt, and if they aren't able to do that, they have no chance at getting to 270. Josh Shapiro is the incumbent governor of Pennsylvania, arguably the only Democrat with a chance of winning up in the Midwest. And so if Democrats are smart, they will choose him to be their nominee. However, the problem is, of course, that Democrats are still wanting to stick with Kamala Harris, at least at this point. Josh Shapiro is only polling at 3%. This is according to a new Emerson College survey that was just released. Kamala Harris at a whopping 37% support. She was at 40 with the previous poll that was released. Now, her numbers are obviously going to go down, especially if she runs for governor of California. She's not going to run for president in 2028 if she does become a California governor. However, when it comes to realistically what's going to happen, Kamala Harris is very unlikely to actually be the 2028 nominee. I would say it would be the next four people on this list that have the best chance: Gavin Newsom, Pete Buttigieg, Gretchen Whitmer, and Josh Shapiro. And I would say the two Midwestern governors of Whitmer and Shapiro are probably the Democrats' strongest prospects. Meanwhile, on the Republican side, JD Vance has a clear lead, and this is good for Republicans because there's no doubt he is the best person for the GOP to nominate in 4 years. He has been chosen to be Trump's successor. There was a lot of doubt about Vance as the pick early on. However, after that debate performance against Tim Walz, he made it clear that he is here to stay. JD Vance is also more popular than he has ever been, and very likely he will be at the top of the Republican ticket in 4 years. Coming back to the map now, we're going to fill in the solid states for both candidates, races that are going to go to Shapiro or Vance by margins of 12 percentage points or more. Starting off with the safe blue states for the governor of Pennsylvania, we have Washington, Oregon, and California. He's going to lock down the West Coast. We also have Colorado. This state has shifted more to the left than any other state over the last 20 years. We also have Hawaii, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Delaware, Maryland, the District of Columbia, and the 1st District of Maine. Next up for JD Vance, his list of safe states is significantly longer. We have Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, all of Nebraska except its 2nd district, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, South Carolina, and Alaska. These are typically the safe red states, but he's also going to pick up Iowa and Ohio. Trump carried Iowa by 13 points, Ohio by 11, but the Buckeye State is, of course, JD Vance's home state, and as the Midwest as a whole continues to shift to the right, Vance is going to have no problem picking up Ohio by 12 points or more as well. And then we have Texas and Florida, two states where Trump absolutely dominated. He won the Lone Star State by 14 points and Florida by 13. Texas was the largest Republican margin since 2012. Florida, the largest since Reagan. And so this will give Vance 218 electoral votes, just 52 away from the presidency. Now, before we get to the likely states, is another really interesting part of the new Emerson poll that we have to look at. Donald Trump is now 24% more popular than Joe Biden 3 weeks after the election. Trump's net favorability is +8. Joe Biden's net approval, meanwhile, is at net -16. Trump is more popular than ever. Meanwhile, Biden is at an all-time low. We're now going to move on to the likely states that will go to either candidate by 5 to 12 percentage points. These races are going to be noticeably more competitive, but one candidate will still maintain a clear edge. And starting off with the governor of Pennsylvania, we have the state of Illinois, a state that Kamala Harris won by just 11 points, even though the last three Democratic nominees of Biden, Clinton, and Obama, they all won the state by 17%. Josh Shapiro isn't going to make too much of a difference as Illinois and the rest of the Midwest continues to shift right. We also have the Empire State of New York, where Trump made historic gains. He lost the Empire State by just 12 points, even though Democrats typically win it by at least 25. And then finally, up in Maine, we have a race that Harris carried by 7. Josh Shapiro can probably hold up at least a 5-point margin, and so with both the solid and likely states now filled in for Shapiro, he sits at 179 electoral votes. Moving on now to the likely states for the vice president-elect, we start off with the 2nd District of Maine, where Trump won by 10 points in the last 2 cycles. Vance's performance is going to be pretty similar. On top of that, we have 2 additional likely states. We'll start off in the Sun Belt with Arizona, 11 electoral votes. Biden became the first Democrat to win the state in nearly 30 years in 2020, when he carried it by 0.3%. However, just 4 years later, Trump will flip Arizona back and carry it by 5. This is with Kari Lake on the ballot for U.S. Senate, dragging Trump down. Without her anywhere in the political scene in Arizona 4 years later, J.D. Vance's performance is only going to be better. He is going to win it by just over 5 points. And then in North Carolina, I can also definitely see Vance coming out on top here by a likely margin. Trump carried the state by 3%, and this was with Mark Robinson, probably the worst gubernatorial nominee ever. He lost his race to Josh Stein by 14%. It was a solid victory for the Democrats, but on the presidential level, Trump still somehow came out on top by a clear margin. In fact, he tripled his 1% margin of victory from 2020. And so in 2024, without Mark Robinson, without Kari Lake, Republicans with J.D. Vance as the nominee are going to win Arizona and North Carolina by at least 5. And so we're now left with 10 states, the 10 most competitive states on the entire map. This is what the new battleground map is going to look like. North Carolina, Arizona, not really that competitive, nor are Iowa or Ohio, but Minnesota, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Virginia, and New Mexico have entered the fray. And so we're now going to move on to the lean states, starting off with the lean states for Shapiro, races where he's going to win by 1 to 5 percentage points. Starting off in the Northeast, we have New Mexico and New Jersey, 2 states where Kamala Harris fumbled the ball. She won the Granite State by just 3%, in New Hampshire by 6. These were abysmal performances. In 2020, Joe Biden carried New Hampshire by 7.5%. In New Jersey, the incumbent president won the state by 16, a 10-point margin larger than Kamala Harris's from 3 weeks ago. We also have New Mexico. The state is only going to continue shifting more and more to the right. I see Josh Shapiro barely scraping by with a victory here, but for now, New Mexico will remain in the Democratic column for 1 election cycle longer. And then add the 2nd District of Nebraska. This will give him an additional electoral vote. Josh Shapiro at 203. So with the solid, likely, and lean states now filled in, the governor of Pennsylvania finally crosses the 200 electoral vote threshold. For J.D. Vance, though, he is getting very close to the presidency. We're going to start off down in Georgia. There's no doubt he's going to win it. The state generally, though, has been more liberal than North Carolina, which was not the case a decade ago. But Republicans are still the favorites in the Peach State. Trump carried it by 2% in 2024. We also have Nevada, where Trump's performance was pretty incredible. Despite no Republican having won the Silver State since 2004, Trump not only flipped Nevada, but won it by 4%, larger than both Biden and Clinton's margin of victories from the state in the last 2 cycles. Coming up now to the Midwest, we have Wisconsin and Michigan, 2 states that Trump flipped in 2024. He won Wisconsin by 1, Michigan by 1.5 points. J.D. Vance is only going to build on Trump's success here from 3 weeks ago. He's going to carry them by at least 1%. And so we're now left with the 3 most competitive states on the map, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. It really is incredible just how Republicans have transformed the electoral map in 2024. I mean, just 4 4 years ago when Joe Biden won in 2020, both Minnesota and Virginia were likely blue states. It was inconceivable that they would become so competitive just 4 years later. And so now to fill in the 3 tilt states, which will be decided by around a 1-point margin, likely less than 1%. We're going to start off with Virginia, which I'm going to give to Josh Shapiro. In recent years, over the last 20 years, it has stayed blue. Democrats are probably going to be able to hold on to it one more time, but Virginia took a 5-point shift to the right in 2024. If that same shift happens again, the state will be red come 2028, but for now, I do think the Democrats can barely hold on. As for JD Vance, we do have Pennsylvania. Even though Josh Shapiro is the state's governor, on the presidential level, it's not going to matter nearly as much as if Shapiro was running for a Senate seat, for example, but JD Vance is likely to hold on to Pennsylvania, even if he's running against Josh Shapiro. I mean, being the governor of a state doesn't really matter that much. We saw that with Tim Walz, who barely got Kamala Harris over the finish line in Minnesota. She won by under 4%, even though Joe Biden won by double that margin in 2020, and he wasn't running with Minnesota's literal governor. The state continues to shift to the right, even though it hasn't voted red in 52 years. But in 2028, I do see JD Vance coming out on top. It's going to be tilt red. And so this is it. This is the strongest matchup if we take the best candidates from both sides. I see JD Vance, though, still coming out on top. Republicans' electoral position right now couldn't be any better. He's at 322 electoral votes. Josh Shapiro at just 216. Shapiro would do even worse than Kamala Harris, and right now, this is the best that the Democratic Party has to offer. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe right now for more content just like this, and I'll see you guys in the next video.